What's going on, fantasy owners? Week 3 is behind us. We have now put it behind us, and we are looking forward to Week 4. Boy, this season already going fast. Pretty soon the calendar will turn from September to October. Just a lot going on, but welcome back to another edition of the Fantasy Football Stock Report. Chris Pearson here with you, as always, to break down the games from Week 3 this week, and looking forward to the matchups in Week 4 so your fantasy teams can be successful. First off, I just want to say, again, I appreciate all the comments and questions and things you're asking. You guys are asking some really great questions about some some players, some situations you're in, and I really appreciate taking the time to answer any of those. So thank you first for that. So let's just dive right into the matchups here to break down everything that happened from this past week, so we can get a victory this week. Also for me this week, I lost a tough one. My first loss of the season. I only lost by 4 points, 113 to 109. Some guys just didn't do very well for me this week. Kobe Fleener disappointed. Eddie Royal didn't find the end zone. And Marshawn Lynch, he got yanked early in the blowout. So I guess some matchups are just too good. So that was the situation there with those guys. So hopefully some of those guys will bounce back this week. Let's start with the Thursday nighter. Andy Reid taking on his former team, Kansas City, taking on Philadelphia, and the Chiefs. They remain perfect. They remain a very strong, unbeaten team. They beat the Eagles 26-16. Jamal Charles was a big star for the Chiefs. And you know usually that, regardless of matchup, usually not sitting Jamal Charles because when he's healthy, because he is just that good of a weapon in that Chiefs offense. He had 20 carries for 92 yards and a touchdown. Also effective in the passing game. He also had 7 catches for 80 yards. So you do the math, and that's 23 points in standard league. So that's huge for Charles' owners. Now, you're definitely not sitting him, regardless of matchup. You're usually not sitting Charles, but especially you are not against the hapless New York Giants this week, who, as all of us saw, were simply destroyed by Carolina last week, 38-0, and are just awful right now. So you're definitely starting Jamal Charles this week. Second star, you might also want to take a flyer on Donnie Avery. And I know that I have harped on this guy in the past, and I know that I've said, that his prime years were done and that he was never worth starting again. But surprise, apparently Alex Smith does not like throwing to Dwayne Bowe. It just shocks me. Bowe is the most talented receiver on the team, and all of a sudden it's Avery that breaks out. So he decides to revitalize Avery's career all of a sudden. But the numbers don't lie. Avery caught all 7 of his targets, all 7 of them. Excuse me. For 141 yards. Now, if this trend continues, and usually with Alex Smith's receivers, when he finds a hot guy, he keeps throwing to him. So this trend might continue. Maybe you take a flyer on Avery as a number 3 wideout. And I know someone already picked him up in my league, not me, but certainly Avery's someone you could utilize at that number 3 spot if the trend continues for Alex Smith throwing to him. And, of course, against the Giants, who just got beat up, maybe it's a good matchup for you. Third star in this game, Jason Avant. Speaking of surprising wide receivers, apparently, again, someone has to be the number 2 receiver in Philadelphia behind the always consistent Deshaun Jackson. And I guess Avant now has the fast track to it. 5 catches for 87 yards and a score. That certainly can't be ignored, just looking at the numbers. But at the same time, is Avant going to be consistent? That's the huge question going forward. Going up against the Broncos, where the Eagles are going to have to throw in this game, he might snag a score. So maybe you could plug Avant in as a number 3 guy or a flex option if you're truly desperate. Hair puller guys, like I mentioned, Dwayne Bowe. And it's really sad that Bowe's fantasy owners have to go through this. He was only targeted 3 times in the game. He made 1 reception for 4 yards. And like I said, Bowe's normally been the most consistent option, so it really hampers Bowe's fantasy value if Smith is not going to look to him and going to look to Donnie Avery instead. But here's the thing with Bowe. He's so talented, you really can't afford to sit him. He's just too good to sit. So you can only hope that Bowe is going to bounce back. So again, going up against the Giants, maybe you look at Bowe as more of a number 2, number 3 option this week. So that's where I have to rank Bowe right now because he's just not getting a lot of the targets. Michael Vick, not a great week for him this week either. Only went 13 of 30 for 201 yards with a score and 2 interceptions. Well, apparently I think that just goes to show that Andy Reid knew his former signal caller pretty darn well. So he had a pretty good game plan for him. Obviously, he was focused on just shutting him down. The Chiefs' D is strong. We know this now. So, by the way, I don't mention DSTs a lot on here, but if somehow the Chiefs DST is available on your wire, wouldn't be a bad idea to pick them up for a bench spot if you have the room. Them or the Cowboys or the Titans, they're all really strong. But next week, of course, Eagles play the Broncos. Vick's going to have to throw a lot, I think, to keep up in that game. I think you can still start Michael Vick and be safe. He puts up points usually when he's done have a tough matchup. So with this matchup, knowing that he's going to have to throw to keep up, maybe some garbage time stuff, I think you can safely start Michael Vick. And last hair puller, Brent Selleck. Again, he's just so inconsistent. That's the problem with him. He was targeted 5 times, but he only caught 2 of them for 18 yards. He's very similar to Kyle Rudolph of Minnesota. And you've heard me talk about Kyle Rudolph on here and how inconsistent he is. Good one or great one week, donut the next, or something like that, or just not that good. He's usually only targeted in the red zone. He's not like a Jimmy Graham that can catch passes all over the field. That's not Selleck's style. He's just a red zone threat. So he's just not very consistent. And going up against Denver, I don't like him as nothing more than a number 2. That's really all I can rate him based on his inconsistency. Just some other notable stats that I wrote down. Alex Smith for Kansas City had an average day. He had a good stat line, 22 of 35 for 273, but 5 sacks, so that just kind of put a damper on things, and no touchdowns. But because of the fact that the Giants just got torched, you could use Smith maybe as a number 2 or a bye week fill-in for this week. Remember, guys, the bye weeks start this week. So if you have any guys from Green Bay or Carolina, guys like Aaron Rodgers, Jermichael Finley, Jordy Nelson, Randall Cobb, James Jones, Cam Newton, Greg Olsen, D'Angelo Williams, you can't start those guys this week because they're on bye. So you have to find a replacement for this week to fill those guys in. So maybe Smith could be that number 2 or bye week filler for you this week based on the good matchup. Shady McCoy, also known as LaShawn, 20 carries for 158 in the score. You know how good LaShawn McCoy is. Even though the Eagles might have to throw a lot against Denver, you can't afford to sit McCoy. He's too good. And as for Deshaun Jackson, only 3 catches for 62 yards. But again, he's just too good to sit against Denver. Okay, moving on to the Sunday matchups. How about the Saints? I mean, the Saints have been really impressive this year with Coach Payton back. Excuse me. The offense stronger than ever. The defense also stronger than ever. They just rolled the Cardinals 31-7. Big win for the Saints. Obviously, one of the stars of the week was Drew Brees. Drew Brees has been very unlike himself. Remember he was on the hair puller list last week, and I said, well, he was very undrew. Well, this week he found his former self, and he went 29 of 46 for 342 yards, 3 touchdowns. He did have 1 interception, but it was also nice to know he also had a rushing touchdown. And that doesn't happen very often for Drew Brees owners. He had 37 points in CBS leagues, and I lost to the guy that had Drew Brees in my league this week. So that kind of hurt me. He just had a very stacked roster, so that was very tough to be up against this week. So obviously right now, Brees is rolling after this win, and you'll want to keep rolling with him in that unbeaten battle on Monday night going up against Miami this week. Second star, Jimmy Graham. I mean, who else? I mean, he clearly is Drew Brees' favorite target and favorite weapon. He was targeted like 15 times in this game. He made 9 catches for 134 yards and 2 scores. He's not just a red zone threat. He's an all-around receiver, and that's what you want in tight ends, and that's why he's one of the best in the league because he's so dynamic. So you already know Graham's your number 1 option. You draft him to be that, and he puts up those numbers every single week. You are starting Jimmy Graham against Miami. And kind of the third star by default. There wasn't really a whole lot of huge performances in the game besides those 2. Is Larry Fitzgerald. 5 catches for 64 yards. But it's really sad how Carson Palmer at quarterback, that really restricts Fitz's talent and his upside. He's just not a great quarterback option. And now this week, Arizona's going up against Tampa Bay. Gee, I wonder who Darrelle Revis is going to focus on. Oh, that's right. He's going to focus on Larry Fitzgerald. So you might want to avoid that at all costs. He's going to be draped all over him. I don't like it. I'm just not fond of it this week. So you probably can't afford to sit Larry Fitzgerald, but then again, just if you start him, just temper your expectations because it's probably going to be a rough week. Hair pullers this week. Lance Moore. 1 catch for 6 yards. If Moore is still on your fantasy team, God help you. I mean, he's just not a good option. People were talking in the preseason he's going to be a number 3 wide receiver. Stop it. He's just not. He's never been consistent enough. He's just, I shared the story last year. It was the saga with him. On again, off again. On again, off again. On again. Do I pick him up? Do I don't pick him up? It was just, I couldn't figure the guy out. So please, don't be that guy. Don't take the risk. I mentioned him, but Carson Palmer, again, we really thought that Palmer would be an upgrade in Arizona, but he has just been a major, major disappointment. 18 of 35 for 187 yards, 2 interceptions, and he was sacked 4 times by that strong Saints defense. If you own him, might be time to jump the ship on him, but then again, he's got a dream matchup this week going up against that Tampa Bay team that really hasn't been great either. If you dare, though, you can maybe take a chance as a number 2, number 3 on him, but just know that it's a really big risk. Finally, third guy, Rashard Mendenhall. I thought it'd be a breakout maybe for him this week, but maybe Mendy was still affected by that injury bug that he had. He only managed 9 carries on 29 yards. Now, Tampa Bay's defense for the next matchup has improved this year, but not extraordinary. But because of that, I could only rate Mendy as more of a number 3 or flex option for that game based on this tough matchup. It's just tough sledding right now for Arizona. Other notables, interesting running back situation for the Saints. Obviously, I talk about not touching these guys unless you have Darren Sproles. But one to watch is Curry Robinson. He led the way in the ground game. He only had 4 carries, but had 38 yards. But maybe you can put him on your scout team, see what happens there. But like I said, the only back to own right now is Darren Sproles. Don't touch Pierre Thomas. Don't fall into the trap. This is a passing offense. Don't be that guy. Marcus Colston, 5 catches for 71 yards. That's a nice day. But he definitely was outplayed by Graham, and that might happen more often than not. But the thing about Colston is he does consistently put up good numbers for you. So I think you can safely start him as a number 2 against Miami. Robert Meacham, another one that's kind of worth watching on your scout team, but not quite ready to add just yet. Only had 2 catches for 34 yards. He did have a touchdown, which is nice, but he's just not targeted enough. So don't really take the flyer on him just yet. Andre Ellington, the running back, I wouldn't bother to consider picking him up off waiver. He's not exactly a real upgrade from Mendenhall. Only had 3 carries for 19 yards. Michael Floyd, the backup behind Fitzgerald, had 4 catches for 49 yards. With Fitz being really blanketed next week, maybe you could take a flyer on Floyd or even Andre Roberts as number 3 options for you. And tight end Rob Hausler is not worth owning. He doesn't get targeted enough. He only had 1 catch for 13 yards. Cincinnati Green Bay. This was really an entertaining game. And in the end, Cincinnati pulls out a huge victory. They win 34-30 at home. Just big games all across the board here. Your stars, Andy Dalton, look, his numbers might not be flashy, but the thing about Dalton is he always needs to put up those respectable numbers. 20 of 28, 235 yards, 2 touchdowns, and a pick. Plus he lost a fumble, but still, that's 17 fantasy points. That's still a very respectable day. So Dalton finds a way to really put up strong, consistent numbers. If he is your backup on your roster, you should be thrilled with that. And if you don't have Aaron Rodgers or Cam Newton this week, Andy Dalton is definitely serviceable this week because he has a great matchup going up against Cleveland this week. So certainly, I think Andy Dalton can be plugged in as a bye-week filler this week. He's a number 2 quarterback usually, and because he just keeps putting up those consistent, strong numbers. And with a great matchup this week, you can roll the dice on Andy Dalton. Giovanni Bernard, star this week. Have I mentioned on here how much that I really, really like Gio Bernard? And again, it's one of these guys I had a question asked about. Ben Stecker. I hope I pronounced your last name right. Sorry. Shout out to him and go Railcats. He asked me about Gio's prospects the rest of the season and how much I really liked him. And you want proof? The proof's in the pudding. 10 carries for 50 yards and a touchdown. Plus, he had 4 catches for 49. This guy puts up yards like a beast, okay? And he just also seems to find the end zone a lot. Bernard, I think, is locked in as one of these must-start guys going forward. He just finds a way to consistently put up touchdowns and yardage. And I think, and definitely you should start him against the Browns this week. Third star, speaking of good running backs, or running backs that fill in for injured guys, how about Jonathan Franklin of Green Bay? Yes, he was a star this week, but the question is, for how long? So Eddie Lacy out with a concussion. James Starks then takes the bulk of the load, and everyone goes off the waiver to get James Starks. And look what happens. Then James Starks gets hurt. He gets a knee injury. So now in comes Jonathan Franklin. But he took full advantage of being that next guy. Starks had 14 carries for 55, but Franklin, 13 carries for 103 yards and a score. That's big day. So apparently it doesn't matter who the running back is in Green Bay. They can put up really good numbers. Now, their situation all hinges on this bye week that's coming up. So obviously you won't be able to start Lacy or Starks or even Franklin so don't put a claim of Franklin off waiver because you won't be able to use him. So if Eddie Lacy and Starks are still nursing their injuries for week 5, Franklin would carry the load in week 5. The Packers going up against the Lions. That's kind of a tougher matchup, but I think it'd be a decent number 2 option if Franklin plays. I think whoever is the Packers running back is a decent number 2 for that game. But like I said, Franklin's not a must-add because A, of the bye week, and B, because of the uncertainty regarding all these injuries. Just be patient with the Packers running backs and see how that situation plays out. Hair pullers this week. The Bengals tight ends, unfortunately, both end up in this category this week. I'm talking about Jermaine Gresham and Tyler Eifert. They had big weeks last week, but here's the thing. The Packers D, not exactly as strong as paper thin as the Steelers, so they kind of fell back to earth. Gresham only had 4 catches for 27 yards. Eifert had 1 catch for 7. So, but you don't want to give up on these guys yet because they could have big days against Cleveland. This is a better matchup for them. So I think you can treat both these guys as maybe decent number 2 options for you and maybe hope that one of them breaks out. And Randall Cobb, a bit of a hair puller this week. He gets targeted. He was targeted 11 times, but he only made 5 catches for 54 yards. He was clearly outperformed by Jordy Nelson this week. With so many mouths to feed in that Packers offense, these kind of games can happen with him. But with a guy of Cobb's talent and caliber, you usually expect pretty good consistency from him. I still think you can start Cobb in Week 5. Again, you're not starting him this week because of the bye week, but going up against Detroit in Week 5, I still think Cobb's a safe play as a number 2 receiver. Other notable guys, obviously we got to talk about how much we like Giovanni Bernard. We got to talk about the law firm. Ben Jarvis Green Ellis, still had a decent day, 10 carries for 29 yards and a score. The problem with Green Ellis is he's not involved in the passing game. He's not like a Bernard, like a Danny Woodhead. Like these guys are involved in the passing game, like a Joique Bell. Who gets involved in the passing game, so he's not as dynamic. He's restricted just to the running game. So that's why Gio has more upside going forward. But I still think you'd get away with using him as a number 2 or even your flex option against the Browns because he still puts up numbers. He still produces. It's a nice timeshare that works. I'm going to be talking a lot in this video about timeshares that work and timeshares that don't work. There are some that really, really work because both guys are so, solid and dynamic, and there are others that are just a mess. So in Cincinnati, timeshare works because Bernard can do both on the ground and the air, while Green Ellis handles a lot on the ground. So this timeshare works. Mohamed Sanu, I'm still not fully sold on him yet. He had a decent day, 68 yards on 4 catches, but A.J. Green, you got to remember, is still the main weapon here, and Sanu can disappear at times from game to game. If you're desperate, you might be able to take a flyer on him. Maybe he's a number 3, number 4 option against Cleveland, but he just doesn't get involved that much. So, and Aaron Rodgers, we know that A-Rod can put up the numbers. We know that, but it was more difficult to go this week against that Cincinnati defense. 26 of 43, 244 yards, a score, and 2 picks. That kind of tells the story. So again, the Packers are on a bye this week. I'll tell you the second option this week. Again, maybe Andy Dalton. So obviously keep Rodgers on your bench this week. But then that Detroit matchup, obviously you're starting A-Rod. Usually starting A-Rod every week, regardless of matchup. But for this week, obviously you got to keep him reserved because of the bye week. Okay, how about Tennessee? Tennessee 20, San Diego 17. Here's the thing about Tennessee, and I had a chat recently again with one of my guys that I enjoy talking to in chats and on the channel and questions, is Chris Bush. We talk a lot about different situations, and I got to tell you, we had a long chat about the Titans and how they're performing this week, and that defense that is enabling them to win a lot of these close games. They're 2-1. They're tied for first in the AFC South. I don't think anyone could have projected that. But it was just we just had a long talk about how impressive Tennessee has been this season and winning these games by the skin of their teeth. So a lot to talk about this game. And let's see. There's some guys this week. I've also, mentioned it in the teaser on the channel that there's some guys this week who are kind of making surprising entrances into the Star Club this week. Let's see. Okay, Marshawn. Yeah. Breeze. Okay. Jake Locker. Wait a minute. Jake Locker's on the star list. Is this a misprint? Is this a joke? Really? Really? You let Locker? He did what? Really? Okay. 1 week Locker's put himself in the VIP lounge. He's in the Star Club. I never thought I'd say it, but He's there. He still didn't do a whole lot of damage through the air. He was 23 of 37, nearly 300 yards, 299 with only one touchdown, but his damage was mostly done on the ground. He had 5 carries for 68 yards and a touchdown. Jake Locker, a rushing quarterback. Yeah, who would have thunk? If Locker would do this consistently, he'd be a stud. He would be on every fantasy roster. Now, the rushing touchdown, that would certainly anger owners of one Chris Johnson, but, but he'd be worth owning, And this week, Tennessee facing the Jets, not exactly a great defense, you might be able to get away with them as a sneaky number 2. I never thought I'd say that, but Jake, you're in doubt this week, buddy. For 1 week, you're in the VIP lounge, hamming it up with Drew Brees and Cam Newton. I don't know, and maybe Cam Newton because they had a great week. So you're hamming it up with those guys for 1 week. They're surprised to see you, but you did good this week, man. If you can be consistent, that's the key. Chris Johnson, I mean, you already knew that. 19 carries for 90 yards. He gets the bulk of the work. He's mostly the offense until Locker breaks out. You can safely start Chris Johnson against the Jets. And, like the Survivor song once said, the search is over. I think the search is finally over. I think we've finally found the number 1 wide receiver in the Titans offense. It looks to be like Nate Washington is finally the guy. There was just this 2-season-long battle to see who's going to be the number 1 guy. And Washington was targeted 10 times. He caught 8 of them for 131 yards. Now, the only risk and, I guess, disclaimer that comes with this is there have been other receivers that get targets, like Kendall Wright, like Delaney Walker, and even Justin Hunter. Justin Hunter caught the touchdown, not Washington. So there's other guys that get involved. But for me, what is it in fantasy? You want consistency. And I think Washington seems to have been the most consistent. I could certainly see either Washington or even Kendall Wright, who's starting to get more involved in the offense, as decent number 3 flyer options for you next week. I don't really fully trust Walker or Hunter yet, although Walker's targets are going up as well. So the way I rank them, Washington, Wright, Walker, and Hunter. That's the way I would rank Tennessee's wide receivers right now. Oh, and at the bottom, Kenny Britt. Yeah, it's time to give up the dream. And just saying, Kenny Britt should not be owned by anyone. Hair pullers for the week. And unfortunately, they're all Chargers. And I'm picking on the Chargers. Hey, all the stars were Titans because they won and they're looking good. Chargers not so good. Phillip Rivers. Phillip, what happened to that new Chargers identity, And maybe you chalk it up to the new strength of that Titans defense, but this was just an off day for Rivers. 20 of 24, that's good, but 184 yards and only 1 touchdown. And guess what? Now he's got to go up against the Cowboys this week. Just shut down the Rams offense, held them to 7 points, sacked Sam Bradford 6 times. It's not a pretty sight. I wouldn't trust Phillip Rivers this week. Way too tough a matchup. Ryan Matthews, Matthews is going to win the running back award this year for something. And it's not a good thing. Doing less with more. 16 carries, but only 58 yards. He's one of those frustrating running backs to own right now. And really, unless you find a better option that's out there on the wire, you can't really cut Ryan Matthews because he still gets a lot of the carries. He still gets a bulk of the work, but he just doesn't do anything with it. So, that's a reason to keep him because he still gets the bulk of the work. But against that Cowboys defense, I think only worth a look as a number 2 option or more of a flex play. Not going to do a whole lot, in my opinion, this week. And Eddie Royal, it might just be time. It might just be time to end the experiment on him, on Vincent Brown. These guys have been nothing but disappointing. they're just not consistent. We thought there'd be a number one receiver that stepped up for San Diego in Daniel Alexander's absence when he tore his ACL. Apparently, that hasn't been happening. It could be Brown one week, it could be Royal the next, it could be Keenan Allen or Malcolm Floyd if he's healthy the next week. We just don't know what's going to happen. So, last week, myself included, I picked up Royal off waivers. I thought that he was going to be, the next big thing. He gave us 2 catches for 34 yards. Now, he did have a touchdown nullified by a penalty, so maybe that's a reason to stash Royal on your bench in case he breaks out again, but I can't afford to take that chance. I don't have the room. Brown only had 2 catches for 11, so really the only consistent option in the offense is your tight end, and that's Antonio Gates. So Gates is going to put up numbers. You definitely can cut Vincent Brown loose for sure. I did that weeks ago. But if you have the room on your bench, if you do, stash Royal in case he breaks out again, just to kind of wait and see to see what happens with him. Other notables, I mentioned Britt, and Danny Woodhead, for the Chargers. Definitely he's worth owning in PPR leagues. But I'm going to take a flyer on him this week as my number 2 running back. I don't have a whole lot of running back depth behind, Marshawn Lynch and Joique Bell and Daryl Richardson I have, but he's kind of banged up, not sure if things going to play Thursday night. So I grabbed Danny Woodhead off of waivers. He puts up decent yardage points because, again, Woodhead is one of those more dynamic guys that gets involved in the passing game. He had 86 total yards. The only problem with Woodhead this week, he lost a couple fumbles this week, but still, when he's consistent, he puts up yardage and gets involved. So I think, he obviously is not an elite starting option going up against Dallas, but again, because of the fact that Woodhead gets involved in the passing game, again, you might get away with him as a number 2 or a flex option for you. Moving on, speaking of those very tough Cowboys, putting it to the Rams, 31-7, huge win for Dallas. Dallas looking really strong right now, all across the board. So just huge things right now for Dallas. Tony Romo could not have had a better week this week. He is obviously the first star of this game. Couldn't have had a better day. His QBR rating was 137.2. I think that's pretty darn close to perfect. It's the highest, obviously, of anybody in the league this season. But, yeah, it's got to be pretty close. 17-24 for 210 yards and 3 touchdowns. That's absolutely outstanding. Like Tannehill in Miami, Romo seems to have finally gotten control of this offense. If you drafted Romo to be your starter, you are finally pleased with him. And going up against the Chargers next week, not exactly a great defensive unit, Romo is obviously a must-start for you. DeMarco Murray. This game right here is why you drafted him to be your number 1 running back right here. When he is healthy, Murray is a monster, and he showed why. 26 carries for 175 yards and a score, plus he even had 28 receiving yards. So against the Chargers next week, you're definitely still rolling with DeMarco Murray. And the third star by default is Dez Bryant. Bryant can have monster days, or he always seems to find a way to do more with so much less. He only had 4 catches for 38 yards, but the touchdown that he scored, that saved his fantasy day. He remains the most consistent option for them, and he remains a must-start against San Diego. Hair pullers, and once again, they're all on the Rams. Daryl Richardson. Boy, oh boy. If you started D-Rich this week, you ended up really disappointed. He was a limited participant in practice all week, that nagging toe injury, but he started, good to go. And then on the second play of the game, fate intervenes. He gets his foot stepped on, and he's done for the day. But here's the thing. His backups didn't really do much justice in his absence. Isaiah Pead and Benny Cunningham, they're mostly big-time disappointments. They're actually really kind of worse than Deerich. But Dallas's D may have had something to do with all of that. So now the Rams are going up against the Niners on Thursday, and if you own Daryl Richardson, it's kind of a shady situation because now you got a short week to prepare. Richardson says he's going to play. Now he was a participant in full practice yesterday, so it looks like all signs are going to point to Richardson to play. But even if he does, I don't know if you can really trust any Rams back against San Fran. Now, they have been carved up at times this season by Marshawn Lynch, by last week by Richardson and Bradshaw. So maybe you could get away with him as a number 2 or flex, but it just depends again on Richardson's health. Now, if he doesn't play, then you look at a guy like Isaiah Pead, his backup, I think would be the best option of the two. Again, a number 2 or flex play, but just monitor the status, see what he does. But obviously, it looks like all signs are pointing to Richardson to play, so you could still plug him in as a number 2 or a flex option for you. Chris Givens is a bit of a hair puller this week, the Rams wide receiver. Always seems to be the most targeted receiver in this Rams receiving core, but he really doesn't do much with it. Targeted 8 times, but only made 2 catches for 54 yards, and he lost a fumble. Outside of Jared Cook, the tight end, there's really no consistent Rams weapon right now. So Givens is truly a hit or miss guy. You might be able to get away with him as a number 3 or a flex play against San Francisco. Same vein for Austin Pettis, who had 2 catches for 20 yards and a score, and Tavon Austin, who had 6 catches for 30. So yeah, right now those guys more of a number 3 or flex option because there's just not really one consistent guy at wideout in that Rams offense. And speaking of Jared Cook, he is the last hair puller this week, but he's only by default because, again, he's usually the most consistent. He only had 5 catches for 44 yards, but there'll be better days in St. Louis. I'm not too worried about Cook. I think you could still start Cook against the Niners, hoping he'll find the end zone. Remember, the Colts just torched him, so you can still roll the dice with Jared Cook. Other notables, Miles frickin' Austin. 2 catches for 22 yards. And OMG, shocker, he hurt his hamstring. Again. And people in the preseason, I had read reports, were pegging this guy as a number 2 wide receiver. Again? The ship has sailed. The train has left. Cut him loose. Jason Witten, tight end for the Cowboys, 5 catches for 67 yards. That's another solid day for one of the league's most consistent tight end options out there. He remains a must-start against San Diego. And Sam Bradford, just a meh day for him, but, that had a lot to do with, obviously, again, the Dallas defense. 29 of 48 for 240 yards and a score. Dallas's D really didn't enable the Rams to do much of anything, and the Cowboys, just simply blew them away. Now, Bradford's going to have to probably throw a lot against San Francisco tomorrow night because the Rams running back situation is an absolute mess. Obviously, again, with Richardson, status unknown, and Pead, and, there's just, you don't know who's going to get the bulk of the work. So maybe you can plug Bradford in as a number 2, number 3 guy, maybe a bye week filler for you this week with the matchup. So just kind of take a wait and see on that. That's how Bradford stacks up this week. Moving on, Cleveland, Minnesota. Didn't expect this. I said on here, last week, this gave me the game of the week, WEAK, because of all the mess in Cleveland with their situation, with, Brian Hoyer at quarterback and Richardson being traded away and, giving up. They're shopping Josh Gordon and Greg Little, for gosh sakes, and so it's getting kind of messy in Minnesota. The games, they're winless, but surprisingly turned out to be a very competitive game, and in the end, Cleveland pulled out a huge 31-27 win. And let's see, okay, so we got Locker in there, hamming it up with Brees and Newton and all them. Okay, yeah. Wait a minute. Who's Brian Hoyer? Oh, He's the Browns quarterback. I thought that was Brandon Weeden. Oh, Weeden's hurt. Okay. Now, what do you do this time? No, his thumb? Nah, okay. He has the Blaine Gabbert injury? Okay. Um, but really, Brian Hoyer? What did he do? He did that. Oh, he had that. Oh, okay. Well, all right, Brian, you can ham it up with Jake Locker in there, and maybe Drew and Campbell say hi to you. Okay. Yeah, Brian Hoyer. Welcome in the Star Club. I never thought that a Browns quarterback could outperform Brandon Weeden and lead the team to a win. But in 1 week, Hoyer did both, and that is certainly worth noting. 30 of 54, 321 yards, and 3 touchdowns. All to the same guy, by the way. Now, the 3 picks is bad, but, it was his first game. He's going to have some shadiness. But certainly, Hoyer is one to watch going forward. I honestly think after this performance, the Browns management even said themselves that if Brian Hoyer had a good week this week, he could steal the starting job from Brandon Weeden. Well, consider the job stolen, because I think this performance has put Brian Hoyer in Starterville in Cleveland. He's in the VIP room. He's in Starterville. Yep, I think he's in both. I think Weeden is going to be a bench rider, a clipboard holder the rest of the year. So going up against the Bengals this week, tough matchup. So Hoyer, I think right now you can only put him as more of a number 3 option for you. Maybe you can plug him in as a desperate bye-week filler. But definitely you got to watch going forward. Brian Hoyer, who would have thought? Josh Gordon. Welcome back, Mr. Gordon. Certainly missed you after that 2-game suspension. It apparently doesn't matter who throws to him. Could be Brandon Weeden, could be Brian Hoyer, could be Joe Schmo from Kokomo. It doesn't matter. Gordon makes the most of his opportunities. And after this performance, why are the Browns wanting to trade him away? I mean, this was absolutely amazing. 10 catches for 146 yards and a touchdown. Oh, and by the way, he also had a 22-yard rush. This guy is a playmaker. He is a dynamic weapon in this Browns offense. I think against the Bengals, he's going to get his looks. He is worth a start as a number 2, number 3 option. And once again, still sitting it up there in the VIP lounge is Jordan Cameron. If you doubted Jordan Cameron in previous weeks, hopefully now you realize he's a must-start option. 6 catches, 66 yards. That's 11 yards per catch and 3 touchdowns. He is a freak in the vein of Jimmy Graham, and he should be in your lineups now every single week. As for the guys who didn't do so well, Willis McGahee, for now. He's a hair puller for now. But I believe that McGahee will only get better in due time. We all knew that he was out of shape coming into the week because he had been out of the game for so long. But the truth is, he had most of the carries of any Browns running back. He had 8 carries, but he only had 9 yards. It will get better. He will get better with time. He is the Browns running back to own if you dare choose to own one. I think you could take a flyer on McGahee. And the Bengals this week, they just got carved up by Jonathan Franklin. So maybe you might get away with McGahee as a number 3 or a flex guy or even a bye-week filler for this week. If you have a Packer running back or D'Angelo Williams, you could maybe get away with McGahee as a filler for the week because I think he's just going to get better with time. That was his first game in at least a few years, so I think it's going to get better for him. As usual, let's all say it together, class. Christian Ponder, 25 of 42 for 228 yards with an interception. No touchdowns. And a lost fumble. There's a few surprises on the Star Club clipboard this week, but the day that Ponder gets on the list, that could be a sign of the end. And Ponder, here's the thing. He's got another dream matchup this week. He's going up against the Steelers. They just got carved up by the Bears. But here's the thing. If he couldn't even have a good game against Cleveland, do you dare give him the chance? I wouldn't. And Greg Jennings. He still gets his share of targets, but he does so little with them because of Ponder. 3 catches for 43 yards. And you might be able to get away with him as a number 3 against the Steelers. And you're probably starting Kyle Rudolph even after that down day with 5 catches for 28 yards because he's a fairly reliable tight end. But that's it. And I still don't like Cordero Patterson or Jerome Simpson, by the way. Just not consistent enough. The other real notable is Adrian Peterson. I don't need to tell you to start AP every single week. You know you're starting AP. 25 carries, 88 yards, and a score. He did lose a fumble, but still a decent day. He's mostly the Vikings offense. This is a dream matchup against the Steelers. AP is going to run rampant on them. Moving on. The blowout of the week. Oh, boom! The blowout of the week. Carolina 38, the Giants, nada, zip, zilch, squat, zero. I mean, did anybody expect this? I mean, does it show that the Panthers are just this good or the Giants that bad? Obviously, we're going to find out in due time, but my word, Carolina made a statement in this one. First star, like I said, he's hanging with Drew Brees and Jake Locker and Brian Hoyer, but that's Cam Newton. Newton said it himself. We are better than an 0-2 team. Or are the Giants truly an 0-3 team? Well, whatever the case may be, Newton's numbers speak volumes. 15-27 for 223 yards, 3 touchdowns, had a pick. Now, the only downside is you're not going to have Newton this week because the bye week. But you are definitely starting Cam Newton week 5 going up against the Cardinals that just got decimated by New Orleans. So, obviously, bench him this week. Find a better option out there for your quarterback. But in week 5, you can plug Newton right back in going up against that weak Arizona defense. D'Angelo Williams is on the list. He's a star. Am I the only one who's high on the guy? I am so sick and tired of reading the reports. Oh, Williams sucks. Oh, his blocking sucks. He shouldn't be started. Stop it! Who else is going to run the ball on the Panthers offense? Well, Newton. But that's it. They have no other options. Jonathan Stewart's still hurt. He's not expected to come back till week 7. 7. D'Angelo Williams is the only back they have. He's okay. He had 23 carries for 120 yards. Stop saying he sucks. Stop saying his blocking sucks. If he puts up numbers like that, it's all that matters. You can start D. Will as a number 2 against the Cards in week 5. Obviously, bench him this week because the bye. But next week, you can plug him right. The week following, you can plug him right back in. Oh, and let's see. These names keep getting more interesting. We've had Locker. We've had Brian Hoyer. Wait. Okay. No. That's got to be a misprint. That's got to be a misprint right there. No. That name cannot be. That he did what? He really? You have videotape to back that up? Okay. Wow. Okay. Really? Oh, boy. This one is going to be the toughest one. I really hate to say it, but for 1 week, Brandon LaFell is a star. I know I'm being really generous this week on some guys that I have railroaded in the past. And I never thought it would happen because I know I told you guys that the LaFell train was over. And I still do, though. I still loathe Brandon LaFell as a consistent option because he's not. There is no way that LaFell is going to score 2 touchdowns every single week. It just isn't going to happen. If you're going to take that chance, let me tell you, you're going to be very disappointed. He is stuck. He's not targeted enough. He is stuck behind Steve Smith and Greg Olsen. He's not targeted enough. That's the problem with Brandon LaFell. You know, and after this performance, the Cardinals might focus more on him. So because of that, I really can't rate LaFell as anything more than a desperate number 4 or a flex option for that Week 5 matchup. You know, obviously you're not touching him this week again because of the bye, but you know, I just don't know what to make of the guy. I really don't. You hope that maybe he'll be more consistent after this, but at the same time, numerous times last year or year before, he had a great day. Oh, I picked him up off waivers, and then he put up a donut. He put up a donut, okay? I don't like donuts. We don't like donuts in fantasy. We like donuts to eat. We don't like donuts in fantasy, okay? So I couldn't stand that anymore with him. So that's kind of my grudge. But for this week anyway, he's hamming it up with his quarterback and Brian Hoyer and Jake Locker. Okay, hair pullers this week. And obviously, guess what? They're all Giants. Actually, the hair puller award might go to the entire team this week. That's right. All the Giants skill players get the hair puller award because they were an absolute embarrassment. Eli Manning, let's start with Eli Manning. Should we start with Eli Manning? Yeah, let's start with Eli Manning. He was sacked 7 times. He only went 12 of 23 for 119 yards and a pick and no touchdowns. You know, and when it gets so bad for your team that Curtis Poopin Painter goes into the game. They played Curtis Painter. It got so bad. That Curtis Painter was in. That's really bad. And guess what, Giants? Next week, you got to go up against the Chiefs. The Chiefs, they're undefeated. Their defense is insane. You cannot rely on Eli Manning as your starter next week against the Chiefs. Not after this performance. The running back committee. Here's a running back committee that doesn't work. Okay, here's a timeshare that doesn't work. Why? Because all of these guys are awful. Okay, they are just awful. You know, David Wilson, yes, he's the lead guy, and he gets the most touches, but he does nothing with them. That, or he fumbles a lot. Darrell Scott does nothing. Brandon Jacobs does nothing. They should be left on benches. They should be left on waivers. Don't touch them. Nah. Wide receivers. Hakeem Nicks put up a donut. Victor Cruz had 3 catches for 25 yards. And Ruben Randall led the team in receiving with 2 catches for 40. Again, just a product of the strong Panthers defense plus a rough day for Eli. Now, Nicks and Cruz are too consistent to sit. You're obviously starting them against the Chiefs, but they're not really elite anymore. Now, Randall, he's only worth a look in deeper leagues because, again, he's just not consistent enough. And tight end Brandon Myers, 3 catches for 33 yards. You know, he's only a number 2 tight end. He just really does not get enough looks on a consistent basis. That's just the problem with him. And a couple other notables. You know, Ted Ginn. You know, the only problem with Ginn, again, I'm going to say it, is that he isn't targeted enough, but he is scoring touchdowns. And I guess that has to warrant some attention in fantasy, you know. And you could do worse than to have him as number 3 going up against the Cardinals in Week 5. You won't be able to play him this week, obviously. But their secondary will be definitely focused on Steve Smith and maybe Brandon LaFell. So maybe you can look at Ginn as a number 3 in Week 5. And again, Steve Smith and Greg Olsen, they're still your must-start guys in Carolina, but temper expectations just a bit because the Cards might be focused on trying to shut them down. They really don't want to get burned again for 2 weeks straight, but these are your most consistent offensive options in Carolina, and they're going up against a defense that's decimated. So you're definitely starting Steve Smith. You're definitely starting Greg Olsen. All right, moving on. Detroit 27, Washington 20. Good game here. Very competitive, but the concern now, the Redskins are 0-3, so that's a big concern for them going forward. Your first star is Matthew Stafford. You know, you don't need me to tell you that Stafford's a must start every single week, because he is, you know. And this was a dream matchup for him. He was expected to carve up the Redskins defense. He did just that. 25 of 42 for 385 yards, 2 scores, had the interception. That kind of hurt. Now, this week's matchup, a little bit trickier for Stafford because he's going up against the Bears in that tough defense, but I still think you can start him. He will find a way to put up fantasy numbers one way or the other. He's just too good of a player to sit. Joique Bell. If you grab Bell off of waivers this week, you reap the benefits. Reggie Bush was declared inactive before the game with that knee issue. Now, he says he's going to play this week in week 4, but here's the thing. Even when Bush was healthy, Bell was still getting involved in the offense. Here again is one of those timeshare committees that works. Why? Because you have Reggie Bush, who carries, the load of the work on the ground, and then you have Joique Bell, who not only can do work on the ground, but also gets involved in the passing game. So I think Bell is still a strong number 2 flex guy going forward for you. He carved up that Redskins defense for 132 total yards and a touchdown. Now, obviously, again, with Bush coming back and the Bears' defense looming, that's going to be a little bit tougher sledding for Bush and Bell this week. But I think he'll still be utilized. I think you can still look at Bell as a number 2 or a flex option for you. He's still going to get some work because he gets so involved in the passing game. I love these running backs that get involved in the passing game because they are so dynamic and can be plugged as number 2s, like Joique Bell, like Danny Woodhead, like Richardson, like Darren Sproles. These guys. It's starting to kind of become a new trend with these running backs. If you have a running back that you can not only also utilize as a passing weapon or receiving weapon for you, that's huge. So I love these guys. I have at least 3 on my team right now. My number 2 running back and Monty Ball didn't pan out, and look what I got. I now have 3 guys that I can start week in and week out as number 2s because they can get involved in the passing game. Joique Bell, Danny Woodhead, Daryl Richardson. I love it. And third star, Alfred Morris of Washington. He's clearly the Redskins' best running back option. You know this. He's the only guy that gets the bulk of the work. And RG3's running ability, we know it's hampered. So he's the best option out there. He showed it again. 73 yards and a score on 15 carries. And the Redskins are going up against the Raiders this week. You can definitely keep riding with Alfred Morris. He's a solid start. Hair pullers. And I hate to say it on this one, but the story of Nate Burleson is an odd one. And if I had the Odd Couple music, I'd play it right now. It's what an odd story. Went from star to hair puller in a matter of one day. Sunday, he goes out and leads the team receiving with 6 catches for 116 yards. He had solidified himself right then and there as the number 2 receiver behind Calvin Johnson, behind Megatron. But then Burleson breaks his arm in a single car crash while adjusting a pizza box. I wish I was kidding you. He was adjusting a pizza box and he hit a median wall and broke his arm and now needs surgery. Just crazy story, crazy stuff. Another one of those another one that goes down in the book of wild and wacky sports injuries. Now, there's been no official word from the Lions. Apparently, he's not done for the year. They say he will return at some point. But you don't want to get Burleson off waivers now, obviously. The option now to get off waivers is Ryan Broyles. Once again, it happened last year. Burleson broke his leg last year, so Ryan Broyles became the go-to guy at number 2 for fantasy purposes. Well, here we go again. Burleson injured. Ryan Broyles now becomes an intriguing number 3 option now in Detroit, as long as his knees stay healthy because of the fact that Burleson's going to miss some time. Adjusting a pizza box. My question then is, where did he have it? Where did he have it in this car? What kind of car was it? Where does he have it? In my car, if I have a pizza box in my car, I just sit it on the front seat. My front seat's big enough, I have no need to adjust that pizza box. It stays right there during my whole ride. Now, if we put it on the dashboard, that I can understand to be adjusted. Oh, I'm going around this turn. I don't want it to slide off. But put it on your front seat, man. Your front seat's got to be big enough to put it on. Put it on there. Don't cause yourself to wreck. So apparently we've learned a few things today from the story of Nate Burleson. Don't text and drive. Don't drink and drive. And don't adjust a pizza box while you drive. There you go. Other hair pullers. Brandon Pettigrew, the Lions tight end. If you expect him to be number 2 tight end, you're kidding yourself, okay? Just doesn't get enough looks. This week, Donut City, leave Pettigrew on waivers. And Leonard Hankerson, the Skins wide receiver, The experiment, I think, with him is over. 1 week wonder to the extreme. 3 catches for 21 yards. Just ditch him or leave him on waivers. Pierre Garçon, obviously, is your must-start option at wideout. And actually, Santana Moss, who is starting to get more involved in that offense, he might be a sneaky number 3 option going up against Oakland. Those two are clearly RG3's favorite weapons. And that's it for that one, except let me talk about RG3 here for a little bit. An average day for RG3, and the poor thing about RG3, he keeps getting criticized for that inability to run, and he's getting blamed for the Redskins' poor start. Just stop it. The guy has a knee brace on. He's coming off a bad knee injury last year. Okay? That's why he can't run very well. And the defense is awful. It's not his fault that the defense is awful. RG3 doesn't play defense, okay? The defense just sucks. His numbers are good. 32 of 50 for 326, but no touchdowns and a pick. That's what hurt. He did rush for 37 yards, but he also lost a fumble. But with the Raiders next week, who just got decimated by Denver, he should bounce back in a nice way. You're going to start RG3 with confidence in this strong matchup. Baltimore rolling Houston 30-9. Huge win for the Ravens this week. They're looking good on a couple facets of the ball. That defense special teams is outstanding. They had a lot of good plays this week. Houston's just really beat up. And again, I talked to Chris Bush about this, about how the Texans are just really beat up right now. They're not, they are a shell of their former selves. Matt Schaub is not elite. There's a timeshare there that, sort of works. So that's kind of a middle timeshare that Foster and Tate have. Andre Johnson is beat up. DeAndre Hopkins has been beat up. He's good but inconsistent. It's just a mess. And now Johnson got hurt again this week with a shin injury. So, it's just a shell of their former selves. Hard to what make of Houston right now. Stars, Bernard Pierce. I told you guys to ride Pierce this week. Ray Rice was out. They're saying he's going to be out again this week, so Pierce took full advantage of this. 24 carries for 65 yards and a touchdown. This just speaks volumes about the talent that Pierce has. So it looks like all signs is Rice is going to miss another week. Pierce is definitely a must-start going against Buffalo. They just got carved up by Bilal Powell, so you're definitely starting Pierce this week. Torrey Smith, still the main receiving threat in this offense. 5 catches for 92 yards. He's definitely a must-start against Buffalo as well. And third star, I'm going to have to give it to DeAndre Hopkins, but only because he's kind of a star in the making. Once Andre Johnson finally decides that his body can't play anymore, Hopkins is going to become the future weapon here in Houston. He led the way with 6 catches for 60 yards. I really love DeAndre Hopkins' upside going forward, but The thing of it is, bit hampered with Schaub as his quarterback. He's gone through a concussion this season already, so it's kind of a he's only worth a look as maybe a number 3 or flex against Seattle because I have a feeling that Houston's going to have to throw a lot in this game. Obviously, you're going to have Richard Sherman to contend with, but he's going to be all over Andre Johnson. So Hopkins might get some openings against Seattle. So I think they're really going to have to throw a lot in that game. Maybe Hopkins number 3 or a flex. Hair pullers, Mr. Wacko Flacco. You know, he didn't have to do much this week because, again, Bernard Pierce, the Ravens defense, they did a lot of the work for him, so that's why Flacco's numbers weren't great. And once again, it shows why that Flacco's not an elite fantasy option because he doesn't do a lot of the work. 16 to 24 for 171 yards, no touchdowns. You know, he's nothing more than a desperate number 2 or 3 play going up against Buffalo this week. I don't even know if you would use him as a bye week filler, even though the matchup's okay. It's just hard to tell what you're going to get from Flacco week after week. Marlon Brown, the wide receiver of the Ravens, the second receiver, he broke out against the Browns last week. Browns, haha. But he fell back to earth this week, only had 2 catches for 6 yards. Now, time will tell if he can leapfrog Jacoby Jones as the number 2 receiving option. But he might already have it because considering Jones is A, he's hurt, and B, he's getting smashed over the head with champagne bottles. So Brown might have it locked up. Don't give up on him just yet. I'm not ready to give up on Marlon Brown just yet. I think you look at him as a number 3 or number 4 option against Buffalo. Andre Johnson, just not what he once was. And then, of course, this week has the shin injury. 5 catches for 36 yards. I don't recommend him, obviously, against the Seahawks. I think Richard Sherman's going to be all over him. But you might not have better options. So because of that, nothing more than a number 2, number 3 option. And tight end Owen Daniels. Boy, Matt Schaub just really restricts his weapons. 5 catches for 29 yards on 9 targets. Nothing more than a number 2 option going up against Seattle this week. Dallas Clark, the Ravens tight end, I'm still not sold on him. He was targeted 7 times, but only made 4 catches for 46 yards. You'll want to leave him on waivers. Schaub, he's kind of in the same vein as Flacco was. Decent offense, but not even close to an elite option. And usually, again, it's that Texans defense usually that when they win, it leads them to victory. The offense is beat up. Schaub doesn't have much to work with. 25 of 35 for 194 yards and a pick. Even though he might have to throw a lot next week, he's not really a recommended starting option against Seattle. Maybe you get away with him as a bye week filler or a number 2, but not recommended. The timeshare at running back. This is one, again, that sort of works because, again, Arian Foster and Ben Tate both get a lot of the work in between each other. They really do split carries about 50-50. But going up against a tough Ravens defense, you weren't really expecting much from either of them. But, hey, both make the most of whatever opportunity they get. So, and Foster does tend to do more with it. He had 12 carries for 54 yards. Tate had 9 for 36. But, again, that tough Seahawks defense, I wouldn't recommend starting either against them, although you probably can't afford to sit Arian Foster. So, but just not good options this week. New England. New England beating Tampa Bay 23-3. Tom Brady's back in the VIP lounge this week. He's back on the star list. Much better week than last week's meltdown against the Jets. But a matchup with the hapless Bucks will do that. When the Bucks were even saying that there's problems with Greg Schiano and Josh Freeman, which, by the way, we read a report. If you're watching ESPN right now, you've probably seen the ticker already. We've seen a report that Josh Freeman is about to be dumped at starting quarterback for Mike Glennon. So keep an eye on that. But Brady this week was 25 of 36 for 225 yards with 2 touchdowns and had a pick. But Brady's back in most owners' good graces, and you're definitely starting him against Atlanta in what should be an offensive shootout. Kembrell Tompkins. He's back in the VIP lounge, you know? Finally had his breakout week after coming oh so close to scoring touchdowns the first 2 weeks of the season. Now, he still misses a lot of his share of targets. He only had 3 catches. He was targeted 7 times, but he had 41 yards with 2 touchdowns, you know? I'm willing to give Teakins a second chance. I'm willing to roll the dice on him and see if this trend continues. I like him as a number 3 against the Falcons, and that's whether or not Danny Amendola comes back from his groin injury or Gronk comes back. I still think he's going to be utilized a lot. Now, I still like Julian Edelman as a number 2-3 going forward as long as Amendola is out. And Aaron Dobson, I think, also can be squarely put on your scout team because he's also starting to get more involved. Give him another week to see if this trend continues with him, but don't add him right away just yet. Let's see what happens with Aaron Dobson, but I definitely like Tompkins. I definitely like Edelman. And if Amendola comes back this week, obviously you're starting him, but to keep monitoring his status. And if Gronk comes back, obviously you're starting Gronk. So Brady's going to be happy with all these weapons that he's finally starting to utilize. And third star, obviously Doug Martin. He's the only weapon right now in the Bucs offense. He should be utilized as such. 20 carries for 88 yards. That's still a decent day. And against the Cards' poorest defense this week, you're starting the muscle hamster. You're starting him guaranteed. Doug Martin, definitely a start. The hair pullers. The running backs in New England. And I had a long and lengthy conversation with Chris Bush about the running back situation in New England. Because what do we do with this heaping pile of mess that is the Patriots running backs? This is a situation, again, this is a situation that really just doesn't work because Shane Vereen is really their only dynamic weapon. But he got hurt week 1. He's out till week 11, and nobody has stepped up into the number 1 spot in New England. So Ridley, Stevan Ridley, he's as hair pulling as it gets right now. Only had 35 yards on 11 carries. And even though he had more carries, he got outrushed by Brandon Bolden and LeGarrette Blount. And that's the thing. It only goes to show how frustrated Belichick is with Ridley when he brings in this middling competition to him to just create just this mess in the backfield. So if you are a Ridley owner, like Chris is, like the guy I talk to a lot, you're kind of in a bit of a pickle here. You don't want to drop him because of his talent and the fact that you probably, if you do drop him, you're not going to get him back. So that's the risk you take if you drop him. But there's a chance he can still break out again at some point during this time frame that Vereen is out. Now if there is a better option on your wire, such as these dynamic guys, such as like a Jason Snelling, like a Joique Bell, like even a Bilal Powell, like a Danny Woodhead, I would probably go ahead and drop Ridley for them. I'd make the move. It all depends on your situation and who's out there on the wire. So really, rating these guys this week, I can't rate Ridley as anything more than a number 3 against Atlanta, just because of the fact that he is struggling so much. But I could honestly see Blount or Bolden as flex options because they're going to get playing time. So that's how I rate those guys this week. Tough situation for owners of Stevan Ridley. Josh Freeman, again, I shared just now the breaking news story that Freeman has probably lost his starting job to Mike Glennon. He's never really been very good anyway. 19 of 41. That's less than half of his passes completed. 236 yards, no scores, and 1 pick. So now that sounds like he's lost his starting job, you're not picking up Josh Freeman, you're not starting Josh Freeman. But going up against the Cardinals, maybe, Glennon hasn't had a whole lot of NFL experience, but maybe he's a desperate number 3 or bye week filler because, again, Arizona's secondary apparently is awful or worse than I thought it was. So they just got burned. So, maybe you can get away with that, but obviously now you're not playing Josh Freeman. And the Bucs wide receivers, Vincent Jackson was hampered by injured ribs, had a poor stat line, 3 catches for 34 yards. Normally he's the only consistent weapon in the offense, but you want to monitor his health throughout the week. Williams, who is a frequent hair puller, stepped up and had 5 catches for 65 yards. You'll want to monitor V. Jackson's status throughout the week, but when he's healthy, he's really the only receiver worth using. If he is out, Williams could be worth a number 3 look against the Cardinals. Might get a touchdown. We'll see what happens. But if Jackson plays, obviously, you're starting him. He's the most consistent weapon no matter who the quarterback is in Tampa Bay. Miami beating Atlanta 27-23. The Dolphins, still perfect, 3-0, rolling along. Ryan Tannehill, if I didn't tell you already, I'm a believer in Ryan Tannehill. Like I said, like Romo in Dallas, he's taking control of the offense. He's made it his own. 24 of 35 for 236 yards and 2 touchdowns. Now, he had a pick and lost a fumble, but that's still a solid day. You know, you wish those turnovers would disappear, but he's not going to get it right all the time. You know, he might have a couple missteps, but as long as the Fins are winning games, Tannehill's going to be heralded. You know, I think he's definitely worth a look as a number 2 starting option or solid bye week filler against the Saints in what should be a Monday night shootout. Lamar Miller, the Dolphins running back, you know, he's still the top back to own in Miami. You know, don't be fooled by Daniel Thomas vulturing that touchdown from him. Unfortunately, it's going to happen sometimes because the Dolphins still believe in him. Apparently, the Dolphins hate fantasy football. But because of that, you know, Miller, nothing more than number 2 against the Saints. But for me, for all intents and purposes, he's still the back to own in Miami. And the third star goes to Julio Jones. You know, 9 catches for 115 yards. Julio is productive every single week. One of the best out there in wide receivers. And his owners, myself included, must love the fact that Roddy White is A, still hobbling, and B, he's telling his owners not to play him if he doesn't practice. Jones is obviously a must-start option against the Patriots this week. Hair pullers this week. Mike Wallace, you know, 2 catches for 22 yards. You know, there's going to be games where he simply just gets outshone. You know, you kind of have to expect it with him. You know, he's still a starter. You're obviously still starting against New Orleans, but he's no longer that elite option. I'd say more of a number 2 guy. Roddy White, I mentioned it, and you hate to do it, but it might be high time to either cut bait on White or simply trade him. Find a better option for you because he's doing nothing for you right now. Only had 2 catches for 16 yards. That injury has clearly affected his game and his psyche. You know, sorry, again, stupid tests. We know it's a test, we know. If you decide to ride the pine, though, and stick with him, nothing more than a number 3 or a flex option for you. And Tony Gonzalez, you know, 4 catches for 24 yards, but you can't really afford to sit Gonzo because normally he is so consistent. Jones is just playing so well, though, that the Falcons really aren't looking Gonzo's way. I still think you can start him against the Patriots this week. Other notables, Brian Hartline. You know, for me, Hartline has cemented his status as a solid number 3 guy going forward. Now, there's always that fear that he might regress because Wallace will have more breakout games, but I think Tannehill loves throwing to Brian Hartline, and you just can't ignore that. You know, after a line of 4 catches for 56 yards and a score, that's 11 fantasy points. I like him as a number 3 going up against the Saints. Tight end Charles Clay in Miami, you know, I still don't trust him. 4 catches for 40 yards. I'd leave him on waivers right now. You know, tight end waivers, they're just junk. After you get to Coby Fleener, they're junk. Trust me, I looked. Matt Ryan, I don't need to tell you, he's consistent all season long. You don't need to tell me I don't need to tell you he's legit. 23 of 38 for 231 yards and 2 scores. Still a solid day, even though they lost. You're starting him against the Pats in a shootout. And the running back committee. Here's another timeshare that works. Steven Jackson is out. He's going to miss at least a few more weeks because of the snagging thigh injury. So Jason Snelling and Jacquizz Rodgers all of a sudden look like really intriguing waiver options. Now, Rodgers is more of the rushing back. He made the most of it with 18 carries for 86 yards. Snelling is your guy who's more dynamic. 11 carries for 53 yards, but also had 4 catches for 58 yards and a score. So as long as Jackson is out, I really like both these guys as either number 2 or flex options. They're going to get their share of yardage and their share of work. You know, again, we mentioned it. Unlike some other committees that are messes like the Pats, like the Giants, this is one that really works out for both guys because, again, you have one guy who's strong in running and you have one guy who's your dynamic. So your dynamo, if you will. You have, okay, here you go. The committees that work, you have one guy who's a ground and pound and the other guy who's a dynamo. There you go. That's the committees that work. Ground and pound guy, dynamo guy. Jacquez Rogers, Jason Snelling. Ben Jarvis Green Ellis, Giovanni Bernard. Ryan Matthews, Danny Woodhead. Reggie Bush, Joique Bell. I mean, we can put a number of committees in this list that work, that have one ground and pound guy and one dynamo. That's really how it works. Maybe you can even put Pierre Thomas and Darren Sproles in that conversation. So that's the committees that work. Jets 27, Buffalo 20. Bilal Powell. If Powell is available in your league, it is time to nab him now, okay? The Chris Ivory train has clearly left the station, and like Elton John saying, and this train don't stop there anymore, it really means my engine's breaking down, okay? It just, you know, it's he's broken down. He's done, you know? Powell is the Jets back to own. He put up a line of 27 carries for 149 yards. Now, it's going to be tougher sledding going up against that tough Titans defense. So I can only rate Powell as maybe more of a number 3 or a flex option. Maybe use him as a bye week filler this week if you're desperate. But right now, Powell's the guy. He's clearly distanced himself from Chris Ivory, who's also beat up a lot with hamstring issues. So that's the situation there. Santonio Holmes and Stephen Hill, these Jets wide receivers. These are guys also you can target now on waivers this week. Now, Holmes, I think, has cemented himself as the go-to target for Geno Smith. Targeted 10 times, and he caught 5 of them for 154 yards with a touchdown. Now, Hill was able to do more with less. He had 3 catches for 108 yards and a score, but I still think both guys could be decent number 3 or bye week filler options going up against Tennessee this week. Hair pullers, they're all Bills. E.J. Manuel, you know, Justin, we thought he was breaking out and could take advantage of a good matchup. Manuel pulls this on us, 19 of 42, 243 yards and a score. You know, not exactly the dazzling numbers that we saw in the first few games. And this week, Bills are going up against that tough Ravens defense. I really don't think Manuel's a recommended play for you this week. C.J. Spiller, you know, Spiller owners have to be some of the most frustrated owners of all time, okay? Because great one week, we praise him, we put him in the VIP lounge, and then he's either awful or he's injured the next week. This time, Spiller left the game with a thigh injury, but thankfully, it's not deemed to be serious this week. He only had 10 carries for 9 yards. Now, if he plays this week, going up against that Ravens defense, he'll be lucky if he even gets to 50 yards, okay? Because the Ravens defense has just been so strong, you know? I think maybe you could get away with Fred Jackson as a flex option this week. Again, this is a committee that, to me, kind of works. You know, now in this situation with Fred Jackson and Spiller, I don't know who's the ground and pound and who's the dynamo here. You know, I would say maybe Jackson's more of the ground and pound because he's not really involved in the passing game. Spiller is the dynamo because he can be used out of the backfield. So again, this committee works, but the problem with Spiller is he's beat up. He's usually never fully healthy. So not a fan of Spiller this week, but maybe you can get away with Jackson as a flex option. And the other hair puller is Robert Woods, but only because he didn't make the most of his targets. he's still getting targeted. He was targeted 10 times in this game, but he only made 2 grabs for 35 yards, So because of that, he's not worth adding on your rosters yet, but certainly a guy you can still scout to see if he starts getting more confidence in catching those passes and seeing if he breaks out. Other guys to talk about, Geno Smith, he's nothing right now more than number 2 quarterback, He's not great, but he's not Mark Sanchez bad either, which Jets fans are happy for. 16 to 29 for 331 yards and 2 scores, but there's still those 2 interceptions. Now, he did have a rushing touchdown, so that's a step in the right direction for Geno. But going up against that tough Titans defense, nothing more than a number 2, number 3 guy. And Stevie Johnson for Buffalo, the only real reliable receiving option that Buffalo has, 6 catches for 86 yards, still a strong day. And I still think you're starting Johnson as number 2 against the Ravens because he's going to get some decent looks. And tight end Scott Chandler, 5 catches for 79 yards and a score, that's good. But the problem is he's in that vein of Kyle Rudolph and not Jimmy Graham. He doesn't get enough targets. He's only targeted when they're in the red zone. He's way too inconsistent. But maybe against the Ravens, maybe you look at Chandler as a number 2, or maybe even a bye week filler if you don't have Jermichael Finley or Greg Olsen this week. Maybe you can plug Chandler in. But just be prepared if he doesn't put up great numbers because he's just so inconsistent. Colts 27, San Francisco 7. Definitely big surprise this week. I mean, the Niners right now have been beat up the last 2 weeks now by Seattle and the Colts. The Colts offense is looking close to outstanding or close to perfect. Just great stuff. The stars this week, obviously, for the Colts are the running backs, Trent Richardson and Ahmad Bradshaw. I mean, I guess, and again, this is a committee, I think, again, that's going to work because Richardson is the ground and pound guy. Now, I think Bradshaw, I don't know if could become that dynamo that gets involved in the passing game. So maybe these are both ground and pound guys that can get their share of work. Now, Richardson also can catch passes out of the backfield too, so he could be, maybe Bradshaw's your ground and pound and Richardson's your dynamo guy. But bottom line is they're both going to get a lot of work, it looks like. This is a committee that works. Richardson only had 35 yards on 13 carries, but he scored on his first carry as a Colt. So to that, they said, take that, Cleveland. We're going to stick it to you now. Stick it to the man, And Bradshaw carved the Niners up for 95 yards on 19 carries and a score. I mean, again, this goes to show now mainly that the Niners' rush defense isn't what it once was. They've been carved up now the last few weeks by Bradshaw, T. Rich, and Marshawn Lynch. So, now this week the Colts play the Jags. Now, the only risk with starting Richardson and Bradshaw against them is that what happened to Marshawn Lynch last week. The case where it's too good a matchup. Lynch wasn't used much in the game. He got yanked in a blowout in the third quarter, so he only had 6 fantasy points. So that's the risk you take with starting these guys. But really, can you take that chance? I don't think you can. If you have Trent Richardson, if you have Ahmad Bradshaw, you're starting them because of the matchup alone, and you hope that the game's doesn't get too out of hand enough that they are still able to produce for your team. The third star by default, not a whole lot in this game, is Anquan Bolden. 5 catches for 67 yards. He's still the most productive weapon in the 49ers offense, especially Vernon Davis was out, didn't play. And his status for Thursday this week is still up in the air. Still a lot of uncertainty whether or not he's going to play or not. I think he's a must-start option against the Rams this week, who, as you know, just got carded by the 49ers this week. Excuse me. Hair pullers, 2 guys for the Colts, T.Y. Hilton and Kobe Fleener, the wide receiver and tight end. But that's only because, again, they were restricted by the conservative game plan. The game plan was to run down the Niners' throats so they didn't have to pass the ball very much. So that's why these guys didn't exactly have big weeks this week. Both only had 2 catches for 13 yards, but don't give up on these guys. I think this is a fluke. It's just a 1-week thing where they had a different game plan for this. I think you can safely start T.Y. Hilton and Kobe Fleener against the Jaguars. I think they'll get more work this week. The Jaguars are going to ground and pound Maurice Jones-Drew. And they're going to have Cecil Shorts to throw to as their weapon. So, I mean, the funny thing about Jacksonville is they have talent. The problem is they need A, a better quarterback, and B, a better defense. That's just the long and short of it. So that's the thing with Jacksonville right now. So you can start these guys against the Jags, Hilton and Fleener. They'll be fine. Colin Kaepernick, never thought that we'd see Kaepernick in the penalty box, in the naughty box. But these last 2 weeks, he has been a shell of his former self. 13 to 27, 150 yards, had an interception, and 2 lost fumbles. You can only hope that it gets better, and this is not a sign of what's to come, but he will definitely be a starting option for you against St. Louis because, again, St. Louis has been decimated the last few weeks, and they got destroyed by the Cowboys this week. Kaepernick should bounce back in a big way. Frank Gore, a bit of a hair puller, but again, not much right for the Niners this week. So he only had 82 yards on 11 carries, but the problem was that Kendall Hunter vultured a touchdown away from him. So that's definitely had Gore owners frowning. You're still starting Gore against the Rams, though, because Gore just got, or the Rams just got obliterated by DeMarco Murray and the Cowboys. So you're starting Frank Gore this week. Andrew Luck, didn't have to do much against the Niners this week because, again, that conservative game plan. Luck only went 18 to 27 for 164 yards, but he had another rushing touchdown on the day on 24 yards. So we've seen Luck do a lot more of that lately, rushing for touchdowns. So this only boosts his fantasy value. So this week, if you have Andrew Luck, if you don't have Aaron Rodgers or Cam Newton this week, and if Andrew Luck's your backup, or if you need, if you find him on waiver by some off chance, he's one of the starts of the week this week going against Jacksonville. The Seahawks carved the Jaguars up through the air last week. I think Luck could potentially do the same thing. Reggie Wayne, still a must-start option. He only had 5 catches for 63 this week, but again, you're starting Wayne against the Jags. Darius Hayward-Bay, I'm still not a believer yet. Yes, he caught all of his targets, 5 of them, only for 59 yards. You can scout him if you want to, but not a must-add yet. And tight end Vance McDonald for the Niners, people are saying, get him off waiver because Vernon Davis is out. Well, Vernon Davis, he is not. 1 catch for 6 yards. I didn't suggest him. Shouldn't pick him up. Vernon Davis might play this week, who knows, but Vance McDonald is not a recommended fill-in. Again, Seattle 45, Jacksonville 17. The Seahawks, this was expected, rolling them. Russell Wilson is your first start this week. Obviously, now anyone can be a start against the Jags, unless they're phased out of the game plan, like Beast Mode was. But Wilson was outstanding, 14 to 21, 202 yards, 4 touchdowns. Now, he did have a pick and lost a fumble, but you just can't overlook his strong numbers. I think he's definitely a must-start against a Texas defense just got carved up by Baltimore. I think Wilson's going to have another big day. The Seahawks, at this point, with the Seahawks offense, you're rarely sitting any Seahawks. You're not sitting Wilson. You're not sitting Marshawn Lynch. He was a bit of a hair puller this week, again, but none of it was his fault. Seahawks burned the Jags through the air, and Lynch got yanked in the third quarter. I'm a Marshawn Lynch owner. I drafted him to be a number 1 running back. He's had 1 good game out of 3, but you can't afford to sit him. You can't afford to sit him. He's just too talented, But he should bounce back against that Texas D this week. They got hounded by Bernard Pierce. Keep rolling with Beast Mode. I kind of got off track there, but back to the stars. A couple stars, of course, on Jacksonville, and these are really their only offensive weapons. We talk about them every week. Maurice Jones-Drew, he's a must-start against the Colts because MJD always finds a way to carve up the Colts. He had 19 carries for 43 yards and a score this week. He'll get more yardage this week and more scoring opportunities against that Colts D that he's never been strong against MJD. You can keep rolling with him this week. And Cecil Shorts. Okay. I guess now we know that MJD isn't the only star when Shorts becomes consistent. So once again, we salute your Shorts. Hello. 8 carries for 143 yards this week. He's the only Jag receiver worth starting for now because Justin Blackmon this week is coming back from suspension. Now, obviously, maybe you've had him on your bench the whole time to wait and see. Maybe you've gone on waivers and got him. If he's on waivers now, maybe you take a look at him. We have to come, don't make him a must start just yet. We want to wait and see what he does first before he, gets into the rhythm of things. But he could be a breakout guy down the line. I think definitely you can start Shorts as a number 2, number 3 against the Colts. Maybe you take a flyer on Blackmon as a number 3 or a flex. But, just kind of take a wait-and-see approach on him to see what happens. Golden Tate and Sidney Rice, they've at least cemented themselves at the very least number 2, number 3 options for the rest of the way. Rice had a breakout day. This was his big breakout for him. 5 catches for 79 yards and 2 scores. But again, so many mouths to feed in Seattle, he's not going to be able to do that every single week. Tate had 5 catches for 88 yards. Now, considering the number 1 receiver, that was Torrey Smith, did the most damage against the Texans last week, I'd give a slight edge to Rice and maybe start him as a number 2, number 3 option. Tate more of a number 3 or a flex. I still don't like Doug Baldwin or Jermaine Kearse going forward. Tight end Zach Miller. Yeah, he scores 2 touchdowns, but on 2 catches for 5 yards, inconsistent written all over it. He's only a desperate number 2 or number 3 play against the Texans this week. And Chad Henne. Like I've said multiple times, you're really not starting any Jags except for MJD, Cecil Shorts, and now maybe Justin Blackmon. That's it. Henne is a slight upgrade of Blaine Godawful Gabbert, but not by much. 18 of 38 for 235 yards, 2 interceptions, and you're not touching Henne against this Colts defense that just shut down Kaepernick and the Niners. No. Sunday Nighter, Chicago 40, Pittsburgh 23. Real quick, some rapid fire. Matt Forte was a star this week. Dream matchup, took advantage, 111 yards and a score. You're not sitting him in most matchups. Keep rolling against the Lions. Antonio Brown was a star for the Steelers this week. 9 catches for 196 yards and 2 scores. Clearly, he's the number 1 weapon in the Steelers offense. He's a must-start against Minnesota next week. He's the only Steelers receiver I trust. Don't trust Jericho Cotchery. Don't trust Emmanuel Sanders. Hair pullers. Brandon Marshall, bit this week, but again, Cutler didn't have to do much against the Steelers because the Bears' defense did a lot of the work in Forte. It restricted him. But you're starting Marshall against Detroit. He's still Cutler's go-to guy. I still don't trust Alshon Jeffrey. A lot of people are going on the wire to get him. I don't. Maybe in a PPR as a number 3, but he just doesn't put up enough yardage for you. Martellus Bennett, the tight end, only 2 catches for 10 yards. But again, normally a must-start guy you can rely on. Again, he was restricted. He should remain that way against Detroit. Big Ben Roethlisberger. It's mostly because of the turnovers. He's responsible for 2 interceptions and 2 fumbles, so 4 of the 5 were on him. That overshadowed his 26 of 41, 406, 2 touchdown stat line. When productive, he's productive, but the mistakes put that dark cloud over everything. But you could plug in Big Ben as a number 2 option against a Minnesota defense that made Cleveland look good. And the running back committee, Le'Veon Bell, all signs are pointing to him coming back this week. And Steelers fans are saying, thank goodness, because they've had to deal with Jonathan Dwyer and Felix Jones for these first few weeks. They shouldn't be owned. Le'Veon Bell, if you have Le'Veon Bell, you're definitely starting him against Minnesota because he really, they don't have much options. So they really don't. He's going to be the guy. You can start Le'Veon Bell this week. And for Jay Cutler, average week this week, but again, didn't have to do much because Forte and the defense did the work. Cutler was 20 of 30 for $159 and a score, had 11 rushing yards as well. Could be a serviceable number 2 against Detroit, but not a dream matchup by any stretch. And finally, Denver and Oakland. Denver wins 37-21. Obviously, we got to start with Peyton Manning. You know it. I know it. He's amazing. He's a must-start every single week. Carved the Raiders up, 32 of 37 for 374 and 3 scores. You're starting him against the Eagles next week. That's going to be a shootout. Hate to say it this week, but Denarius Moore is kind of a star this week for the Raiders. Although his touchdown, though, kind of fluky. Poor tackling was to blame for that. Two Denver defenders collided each other over the middle that allowed Moore to escape for the long score. But he was targeted 11 times, and he caught 6 for 124 yards with that score. This is what we expected out of Moore earlier in the season, and maybe he keeps this going and be a number 3 receiver against the Skins. But again, don't be surprised if he falters as well. Everybody else was kind of frustrating. Actually, though, with Denver, though, the wide receivers, the tight end, they were all really good, of course. The wide receiver committee, you can start these guys every single week. This is a wide receiver committee that works. Demaryius Thomas, Deck, Eric Decker, Wes Welker, they all had outstanding weeks. No short straw. They can all be started against the Eagles. And oh, by the way, Orange Julius, that's Julius Thomas, he can be started too. 3 catches for 37 yards and a score. The running back committee, hair pullers, all of them. This is even more of a painful headache because just when we thought Noshawn Moreno was the guy, this week Ronnie Hillman was the guy. Monty Ball could be the guy if he didn't fumble over and over. You know what? I don't know. I don't know which one of these guys to own anymore. Do you? I don't. I'd avoid it altogether. All 3 are nothing more than flexes, but which one do you pick? I don't know. Maybe you play rock, paper, scissors with your friends to decide. I don't know. Or use a random number generator, something. I don't know anymore. Terrell Pryor, decent week. When you're going up against Peyton Manning, you're going to get A, beat, and B, overshadowed. Pryor went 19 to 28 for 281 and a score. He rushed for 36. Pryor's flashy, but nothing more than a number 2, number 3. Although he could be a sneaky bye week filler for you against the Redskins defense. They're paper thin as the Jags. We know that. Darren McFadden was a hair puller this week. The Broncos' run D apparently is really, really strong this year. McFadden paid the price, only 9 yards on 12 carries. The touchdown, though, saved his day. But he'll bounce back against that Skins defense that's awful. Run DMC is still a must start. And Rod Streeter, 3 catches for 42 yards. This Oakland offense really confusing. Streeter, I don't think is recommended going forward because apparently, once again, he has been leapfrogged by Denarius Moore. Again. So that's it. That is it for week 3, guys. And again, I really hope that you guys do well in your leagues this week. To get out there in week 4 with the bye weeks now coming around, we have to change our strategies up a bit. Some things changing, some different things going forward. But again, good luck this week. Go to get those wins, and we will see you again here next week for the week 4 recap and a preview of week 5 on the next edition of the Fantasy Football Stock Report. Thank you. God bless. Thank you again for all the comments and the questions that you guys send me. And I'm usually, unless I'm working, I'm usually available for chat anytime. So hit me up if you want to. And thank you again. Good luck. God bless. See you next week.